Welcome to Denton Outdoors. Today, I'm going to be sharing 3 of my most challenging days on trail, and more importantly, what those days taught me. The first day I'm going to talk about was on the Tecumseh Trail, which is a 42-mile through hike in southern Indiana. This was my second backpacking trip ever, so I was still a beginner, and I had a really good plan. I knew where I wanted to stop, where I wanted to get water, but like I said, I was still a beginner. So the first day I started mid-afternoon hiking, and I kind of had 2 plans based on how far I got. I wanted to try to get to a shelter at mile 14, but if that didn't happen, I knew I could get to this shelter at mile 10. So I ended up only getting to the shelter at mile 10, and here's where the problem is. That means day 2 I had to do 21 miles, and to this point I had maybe hiked a 12-mile day. But in my mind, I was just like, I have all day to hike, so 21 should not be that bad. But it was much, much, much harder than I thought it would be. Not to mention, in this 21-mile day, I had a 12-mile water carry. And I knew about the 12-mile water carry, and I knew where I was getting water, but I don't think I really understood how much water I would need for 12 miles. So I probably only carried like 1.5 liters, and for the last few miles of that 12-mile stretch until I got to camp, I was like dangerously low on water. I was so exhausted, and it was like super tough hiking. This day taught me a lot about my limits. It taught me how much water I actually drink on trail, and it taught me not to plan a hike without actually understanding how difficult it's going to be. The next hike I'm going to talk about was the most recent hike I actually did, and kind of the inspiration for this video. It was just a 6-mile loop in the Wichita Mountains, and it was supposed to be pretty easy, and actually the hiking was pretty easy, not too bad. But when I woke up and was going to start the hike, it was storming, so I wasn't even sure I was going to start it. I ended up waiting a couple hours to start the trail, and it ended up being okay, but from the beginning I was just not sure that this was going to happen. Then once I got on trail, I was hiking near this canyon, and I saw a herd of elk, and it was just like amazing. Like honestly, some of the best hiking that I've ever done. But then as I kept going, I eventually got into a super brushy area of trail, probably the hardest part of the trail, hiking wise, and I almost stepped on a rattlesnake. And like that just like freaked me out. I had to back up. I took like a good break to kind of collect myself, come up with a plan to get around it, and luckily like got around it. It was all okay, but it was a lot to handle. So then shortly after the rattlesnake, I come across 2 ginormous bull bison that are just standing right in the trail, and I'm not as worried of them as I was the rattlesnake, but it was just like I started the hike late, ran into the rattlesnake, and now I had to wait for these bison. And I waited for probably 40 minutes, and they just did not budge. So I had to kind of bushwhack my way around the bison, just like I had to bushwhack my way around the rattlesnake. And then I was pretty close to getting to the end of the trail, and I was like very, very exhausted by the end, more mentally than physically. There were just a lot of highs and lows from this trail, from not thinking I was going to get to do it in the morning, to seeing the canyon and the elk herd, to the scary situation with the rattlesnake, and then the inconvenience of the bison. There was just a lot to take in from this trail. And I learned a lot from this trip, mostly that like the mental aspect of hiking is a very, very real thing. And maybe more importantly than anything I've learned on a trail yet is that I think I need to get an SOS device. I know a lot of people use them. They're kind of expensive, and I haven't gotten one yet. But if that rattlesnake would have bit me, I have no clue what I would have done, because I did not have great cell service out there. So that is probably the biggest takeaway from this hike. finally, my hike of Mount Katahdin. This was a really, really special hike. I did this hike on the AT or the Hunt Trail, whichever one you want to call it. I started super early in the morning, like 5 o'clock. And they have like a sign-in sheet at the beginning of this trail, and there were people who had signed in before me. So there were people that started earlier, as there always is. But hiking was great going up. It was going really, really well. And then I got to the tree line, and it was like a straight mile of bouldering and the fastest, most fierce wind I have ever experienced. That mile felt like it lasted for hours. It was pretty scary. I had never really bouldered or done rock scrambles like this before. By this point, I had been hiking for a while, and I felt really confident with my hiking abilities, but this was just totally different than anything I had done, and it was a bit scary. So I got through this like mile of trail, and then when I got to the top, the plateau of the mountain, I just looked back, and I mean, it was just like unbelievable thinking about like what I just climbed. I had never experienced anything like that before, and it was really, really tough. So then I get up to the top of the mountain, and it's just like the absolute best views I've ever had on any mountain still to this day. So this trail, I mean, it kicked my butt, and that rock scramble section with the wind was like super scary. But I think what this trail taught me was that conquering your fears can sometimes lead to the best day of your life. And this trail to this day is still my favorite trail I've ever hiked, my favorite hike I've ever hiked, but it was definitely one of the toughest days I've ever had on trail. I hope you enjoyed my stories. Let me know in the comment what your toughest day of hiking was and what you learned from it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next adventure.